Hello, everyone. We're about to get going. Before we do anything, first, if you can hear my voice, go ahead and give Mr. Brem, the real one, give Mr. Brem a thumbs up right now. And he will give you a thumbs up back once you've done that. Perfect. Now, once you've done that, get up, literally right now, stand up, and leave the classroom and proceed to A Hall, to Hall A. You can go right now. Just bring this with you. We'll come back to the classroom. And while you're walking over there, I want to tell you a little bit of a story, which is a story that has a big effect on this class. When I was growing up, when I was about 15 or 16 years old, a little younger than you, there was a wall of photos in my house, of family photos, and nearly about 20 of them on this one wall. Now, a lot of them were of me and my immediate family, but there were about half of the photos that I actually had no idea who they were of. I could guess that maybe some of them were my grandparents and one of them was my great-grandparents, but I didn't know. And there were these very stern-looking black and white photos. And one day I asked my mom, somewhere around the age of 15 or 16, who is this? Who is this? Who are all these people? And my mom proceeded to tell me the story. And she didn't just say, oh, it's grandma or something like that. She said, this is when your great-grandparents got married. This was your great-great-grandfather who came to America as a chef. And so forth and so on. And she told me not just, oh, here's a name, and she didn't even tell me any dates at all. I don't think she even knew the dates. But she told me the story of what happened. And it was a fairly sweeping story, and to see how the pictures connected, to see how different branches of the family met. And you couldn't have guessed it from the photos, but there was a great deal of drama there. Of things that could have happened, things that because of a certain accident, something else happened, and that changed forever my family, where my family lived, how I grew up, how I was formed. Now, having said that, I want you now, hopefully you're just about in A Hall, I want you now to think of the interviews you conducted last night with your family members. And I'm sure you learned things about your family that you wouldn't have known just from looking at them or just from guessing. That these, what seems to be old and of the past, can actually have a fair deal of drama to it. And now that you're in A Hall, and you can walk just inside of A Hall, that's fine, I now invite you to look up. I want you to look at the top of the walls, and you'll notice a whole series of pictures on both sides, on the left and right sides of A Hall, of church history. These are probably some of the most overlooked pictures in all of St. Mary's. They're some of the most ignored things of St. Mary's. And as I'm talking about this, I want you to walk up and down the hall once. I want you to walk all the way towards El Dorado and then back up to where you entered A Hall. As I said, these photos are very ignored. They're like trophies and plaques that no one knows who they belong to around here. Each one of these pictures represents 1 century of church history, with all 20 centuries from the 1st to the 20th. And they are in order, but the order begins towards El Dorado. Now, on that note, I want to highlight some aspects of church history now to you. Up here on these walls are glimpses of the past. They reveal saints and sinners, heroes, villains, cowards. There's drama here. There's bloodshed, betrayal, the bloodshed of the martyrs in particular. There were opportunities for greatness, embraced by some and avoided by others. We find suppression and oppression. There are also mysteries, and we will admit those. Events that historians to this day cannot entirely explain. And this is where we freely admit of God, that God himself has guided some of the currents and the eddies and the flows of our human narrative. But why should history matter? As you're looking at these somewhat monochromatic pictures, you lived without knowing those incidents in your family history. Why does it matter now? Why does it matter to you? As the famous Roman politician and one of the greatest speakers of human history, Cicero, once said, "To be ignorant of the past is to forever be a child." Cicero understood the numerous purposes of the study of history, as many great minds have pointed out. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. There's a reason that World War I, also known as the War to End All Wars, had a sequel. Livy, another great Roman historian, said that history offers us examples and warnings. Fine things to take as models, and then base things rotten through and through to avoid. Thucydides, one of the first historians ever of human history, said that history actually has two purposes: how the knowledge of the past helps us interpret the future. It gives us a maturity to understand the world as it is, what has happened to bring us to this place. And as I'm concluding this part, I want you to return back to where you entered Ahol. And as you're walking there, to give you a sense of this, when your children, frequently we tell children that we will tell them things when they're older. We tell children, small children, half-truths. We try to shield them from brutal reality. We wait for them to be older, for them to understand how the world really is, how adults truly behave. Well, that moment, in many ways, has arrived now. This is going to be an understanding of what has happened in its truthfulness, with as little bias as possible to give to any treatment of history. And that is what real history is. It's the story of what humanity has done. As you return now to the area where you entered Ahol, you can look to the right and see the famous rise of Islam in the 7th century. There are Roman numerals in the corners of the pictures that let you know which century you're looking at. On the left, you see a man with an axe, and that man has a lot more to do with Germany than you might suspect. In the middle of that picture on the 8th there's a man bowing down and receiving a crown. That action will change how the church operated for 1,000 years. And it had entirely to do with a series of barbarians and a French king who wanted to help the Pope. If you continue looking at the left as you come in, you can head down 3 or so pictures. You could go to the 11th century. We have the famous Crusades. One of the most questioned actions of the church. Why did the church sanction a series of wars? Multiple wars, 8 of them in fact, in the Holy Land alone, and other wars elsewhere over other issues, over barbarians, over heresies, over land. What was going on? And yet at the same time, if you look in the middle of that painting, you see something called the Truce of God. It's the cardinal leaning out of the window. The church at the same time was trying to limit violence and bloodshed. As you continue down to the very next picture on the left there, you should be right across from Mrs. House's room right now. In the 12th century, you see that the Crusades continued. They were not instantly done. You continue once more to the 13th century, and we have the famous Inquisition. Why did the church do that? Why did the church, you see the person being burned at the stake, why did the church sanction such easy access to the death penalty, and for what reasons? In fact, one of the greatest saints of the church, and one of the most mysterious saints of the church, and one of the most fascinating people of human history, Joan of Arc herself, was caught up even in the Inquisition, was ultimately tried by an Inquisition court. And keep in mind, she did that when she was your age. If you head over 2 more pictures, go to the 16th century. I'm sorry, 3 more pictures. Head to the 16th century. You'll see the picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the corner. And on the left there, you'll see the 3 famous fathers of the Protestant Reformation or Revolt: Luther, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and King Henry VIII of England. Those 3 men did more to shape history, modern history, economics, and church history than perhaps any others in recent years. And yet what's quite strange is of those 3 men on the left, one of them died believing himself to be Catholic. And at the same time, the church was absolutely disintegrating in a place where it had been safe for centuries. The church was growing elsewhere. You have the famous appearance of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, coupled with millions of converts to Catholicism. As you go just one more painting, you see the rise of the missions, not just in America, but elsewhere, in the Far East, in Africa. And this is all taking place at the same time as the Enlightenment, as the wars of religion, as the famous Galileo affair. Who said what? Who did what? If you head over to the 18th century, we see even more problems unfold. Now, I bring all this up. I'm just showing you a brief sample of so many things that we could talk about. But why? Because the church is in history, and yet at the same time, the church transcends history. The 20th century historian Christopher Dawson said that religion is the key to history. If we look at great movements of art and literature, we see them rooted in pointing back to the church. And finally, as you head back to class, and it's time to turn around and head back to class now, know that history is fun. It's not the study of dates, it's the study of people who went on dates. We're going to talk about exploding buildings, Vikings, battles of blood drinkers, monkeys, and throwing hand grenades. Now, the people we study, as you're walking back to class now, the people we study learned all of the same things you learned. They went to class, they went to school, they learned the dogma, they learned the morality and the sacraments as you did junior year, the Gospels, they learned about the church, and here is what happened. Here's what they did. And here's how they shaped not simply their own world, but here's how they shaped our world. I hope you enjoyed that. You can go ahead and unplug. The video is ended. Go to class.